the Celebrity Jobber Podcast with Jeff Zito. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, give a 5-star rating, and leave a review. Check out all our past episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you pod. What if these celebrities weren't famous? What would they have become? What was their first job? We're about to find out.
Our guest is a guitarist who's played with Megadeth, Alice Cooper, Joe Lynn Turner, Asia, the band Savatage, and the band you really know him from, the Trans-Siberian Orchestra. The band Savatage was a hair band from Tampa, Florida, who, kind of played that style of music in the late 80s, early 90s. And about 30 years ago, the band Savatage releases this classical, orchestral, rockin' Christmas song called Christmas Eve Sarajevo 1224. This thing quickly exploded. They ended up changing the name of the band from Savatage to Trans-Siberian Orchestra. And during the Christmas season, they sell out arenas all over the world. Such an amazing story. My guest this week on Celebrity Jobber, Al Pitrelli from Trans-Siberian Orchestra. How's it going, Al?
Pretty awesome. Thank you for asking. How about yourself today?
I'm doing great. This is probably going to be one of the biggest coincidences in the history of coincidences. But
okay,
if I told you that it just so happened to run into my good friend, legendary DJ Mason Dixon earlier today, and I told him, "Hey man, I'm having Al Pitrelli from TSO." I said, "Tell me the story, man." So how crazy is that? First of all, that I ran into this guy who is kind of involved a little bit in your story, correct?
No joke, dude. That's amazing that you ran into him. I love Mason, man. We've been friends for 28 years now.
He's a legend. I mean, he's a legend in the Tampa Bay radio market, and I'm proud to call him my friend. So where are you from? I know where you're from, but I got to ask you, where are you from? Where are you from?
Well, born and bred in New York. I lived in New York City forever. Now I make my home in the mountains of Pennsylvania with my wife and my 2 little girls.
Okay. So growing up in New York, pretty much all your childhood spent in New York?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So when did music play a big role in your life?
1964, the Ed Sullivan Show when the Beatles played for the very first time.
You're kidding me. Wow. So that was it.
I was 2 years old in my feety pajamas, and that was it. And, they changed the world, in that 2-minute song, But it, I didn't really understand what was going on. I just knew that, my mom will tell you the story. But, she said that I was transfixed to the black and white TV in my family's living room. And my granddaddy had, like, an old acoustic guitar not too far from it. And I just remember, I don't remember, but she said that I just went over there and started strumming the guitar. I just wanted to be a Beatle.
Wow.
And that's been, I'll be 61 years old next week. And that's what did it. And it never let go of my soul.
That's crazy. So growing up in New York, when did when did you start playing guitar? When did you start, being a musician?
Well, I started beating on the guitar, even at 2 years old, strumming it, and then back then, there was really only AM radio around. So, in my dad's Pontiac, whatever car it was, you'd be hearing all sorts of different music coming out of that little speaker in the dashboard. And the only 2 real, styles of music back then for me was good music and bad music.
Right.
That was it. Wasn't any genre-specific radio or anything going on until you got into, when FM kicked in. And then, going through the public school system in the 60s, I think I must have been, 7 years old, 8 years old when they handed me a trumpet. And, I had already started taking guitar lessons by the time I was 5, and I'd be performing in the jazz band or the orchestra or the choir or whatever it was. So it was a big part of my growing up. In every party, every family get-together, somebody had Motown blasting through the stereo, always listening to Gladys Knight and Marvin Gaye, The Temptations. Music was, a lot of the TV shows, the variety shows, a lot of music on it,
So were your parents musicians?
No, they could barely play the radio.
Okay.
And listen, and they thought this whole music thing was really cute until It wasn't until they realized that I was obsessed. And by the time, I got to junior high is where it started getting a little squirrely in my house.
Okay.
Because I wanted nothing to do with, like, world history or government or algebra. I just wanted to, like, get the new Allman Brothers record, the new Skinner album,
right.
the new Mountain album, learn how to play like Leslie West or Johnny Winter, whatever.
So it was cute in the beginning, and then it started kind of bothering them as you're getting a little older. They're like, okay, Al, maybe put that down and let's think about what kind of job you'd like to have when you get older.
Yeah, and my dad, who was an educator, he was actually my principal in high school.
Wow.
That made that 3 years even a little bit more special.
I would imagine.
Oh boy, and I remember like trying to be clever with him, and I heard a Billy Joel quote, and I tried to use it on my father, and it didn't really work out well. But I said, well, I ain't going to Columbia University. I'm going to Columbia Records, and that led to a very painful next half an hour.
Oh my gosh. Well, okay, so college, you did kind of do what you wanted to do, right? Because you went to a musical school.
Mm-hmm. I kicked the tires on that, and I went to community college for like a semester. Then I went up to Boston to Berkeley College. A friend of mine had said, you'll have a really good experience up there, and I lasted another semester. But it just wasn't for me. The curriculum was fine, but I wanted to go hit the streets of New York City, and I just had it in my mind that I'm going to do this my way on my terms.
Okay, so I want to know, have you seen these commercials about your A1C and diabetes? It seems like they're all over the place, right? It seems like we've got a real problem with eating healthy. And you get older and you start thinking about this more and more. And unless you're one of those people that pack a lunch to go to work, you know how difficult it is to eat healthy. Well, folks, I'm here to tell you about Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit. And it's good stuff. Honestly, I haven't had a bad one yet. And you get to choose from like over 34 weekly flavor-packed, fresh, never frozen meals ready to eat in 2 minutes. That's right, I said never frozen. You can choose the effortless option, lunch to go. Gourmet Plus, the calorie smart option with under 550 calories per serving. Or if you're a real meat eater, Protein Plus. This September, get Factor and enjoy eating well without the hassle. Flavor-packed meals delivered to your door ready in just 2 minutes, no prep, no mess. Head to factormeals.com/jobber50 and use code JOBBER50. Get 50% off. That's code JOBBER50 at factormeals.com/jobber50 to get 50% off.
The Celebrity Jobber Podcast with Jeff Zito. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, give a 5-star rating, and leave a review. Check out all our past episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you pod.
So let me talk a little bit about something that I know a lot about, and that's the band Savatage. I'm from New Jersey originally, but moved to Sarasota, Florida when I was 14 years old, and on the radio, Gutter Ballet, some of the songs from Savatage was a pretty big band, I'd say regionally here in Florida. It got a lot of airplay, but you guys definitely had some national success. Tell me about how you joined up in this band, Savatage, from Tampa Bay.
Oh, this is an amazing story, dude. Talk about life's circuitous journey of lefts and rights, right?
Right.
So I decided I'm going to bail out of Berkeley. I didn't really know what I was going to do, but I just knew that I wasn't going to stay there. I wanted to go hit the streets of New York. And I ended up doing that and starting to get a name for myself. And I got a job in 1985 working for a guy named Michael Bolton.
Michael Bolton, When a Man Loves a Woman, Michael Bolton?
When he was still kind of like a real rock and roll. He had a hit called Fool's Game, Everybody's Crazy. It was like, this dude's awesome.
A lot of people don't know that Michael Bolton,
Yeah, he became huge in what he became huge at, but if you go back into his catalog, it's like, yeah, he was awesome. He still is awesome. But anyway, long and the short of it is, his management team was a very famous management company in New York City, and now here I am again. Like I had said, at the front of our conversation, I wanted to go cut my teeth in New York the old-fashioned way.
Right.
One of the guys working in that management office was a young, up-and-coming producer named Paul O'Neill. All right, now this is 1985 I met Paul, and we became friends.
Okay.
And that gratuitous conversation took place where you said, hey, dude, we got to work together one day. Absolutely. Anyway, I go on my journey, in my career. Paul went on his. And 10 years later, he called me up out of the blue, and he says, I'm working on the Savatage record. And we've tried to look at a bunch of different guitar players, and Chris Caffrey is still with us. Obviously, Chris Oliva passed away a bunch of years prior. Rest his soul, great guitar player. He goes, but I'm having trouble finding somebody who's really understanding the concept and the story behind what I'm writing. Would you come on in? Because he knew I played with Cooper for a while, and Alice was very, big into theatrical presentation of rock and roll. I was like, yeah, dude, I'd love to work with you finally. Here I come. And I walked in, and this was Sabotage Dead Winter Dead album.
Okay.
Put the faders up on what was to become Christmas Eve 12/24, Sarajevo.
Right.
And he told me the story behind it, and I said, all right, you do know that I was Cooper's MD, and I played in Zagreb and Belgrade before the war. So I kind of really, I get what you're talking about. Press record.
Okay.
And I started to play those opening notes, ba 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 ba, and we put a cellist playing "God Rest You Merry Gentlemen" over the top of that, and that became the foreshadowing to what the song was going to explode at any minute. And I treated his song like I was treating a soundtrack, and that's what one of the things he really enjoyed about how I was going to play guitar. I wasn't really concerned with shredding over it until the time came. That's a different dynamic. That's a different tool. But, Paul was really, really into the way that I would just take his stories and try to, have them come out as notes. And, you're going back to what we talked about earlier, and that was it. I was thrilled to be part of something so musically important, such a wonderful art form he was creating. And you fast forward, a bunch of months, and it's almost 28 years ago, I think maybe next month or so, that Mason Dixon stumbled upon that piece of music, played it on the air, and the rest is literally history.
Wow. I mean, because I remember at the time I was working at a station called WYNF in Sarasota, and I remember getting the record, and I was very familiar with Sabotage from being here for a while, and I get this record, and I literally thought it was a mistake, because what the band used to sound like prior to this song that you're talking about, Christmas Eve Sarajevo, this was a completely different vibe altogether, and I was puzzled. I honestly was like, this doesn't make sense. It's got to be a mistake. So that was my first impression when opening.
That's still my impression. Because I talk about the best mistake ever.
I mean, but like that. I don't want to use the term hair band, but I mean, Sabotage was in that world.
Right, yeah.
That was kind of the sound that they had. So when this instrumental, long instrumental track comes out with this Christmas vibe and this orchestra, it just kind of blew my mind. Now that's all that was my first take on listening, but it was soon after that, it didn't take long, that you would hear about it more and more and more. And basically what you said, Mason Dixon in Tampa put it on the radio. He actually told me he called his pal Scott Shannon up in New York City. He said, put this on the radio up there. Did the same thing for him. It blew up. And we're talking months later, this song has created this career for you. I mean, I got to ask you, did you ever have a job like outside of music, Al? Like, what was your first job?
Oh, 1,000 of them when I was a kid.
You did? Okay.
Snow on Long Island, driveways, raking leaves, landscaping, fixing pools, working at beer distributors, working at motels. You name it, I did it.
So this was something that you would have to consider. This has got to be life-changing. Was this like the big break, meeting Paul O'Neill back in 1985, do you think? Like, I know it was a series of things that happened. I know you worked with Alice Cooper. I know you worked with Joe Lynn Turner and Megadeth. But, like, was this the big break?
Yeah, it's a 40-year-old story.
Right. Right.
And, it's just like, you go on tour with a band, and, you're not making really any money at the time yet, I mean, small tours, you're playing clubs, you're playing theaters, and what do? You come back and what I did, forever is I teach. So I was like, I got a bunch of students, and hey, let me show you this riff, or what do you want to work on? And then, I got a gig playing with this guy. I go to work, and then when you're on break, whether I needed the money or not, I want to come home and teach.
Okay.
And when I started playing with Cooper is when the money started getting real.
Got it.
And that carried on for a while in a lot of sessions and a lot of, what do you call it, jingles for TV, a lot of different records from a lot of different artists, working with Celine Dion, working with Taylor Dane, working with Dee Snider, just constantly trying to work, and kind of changing hats at all times. So that right there was kind of the day job of it all, is like not really having a home. Kind of being, a hired gun, if you will, whatever you want to call it. And I was proud of that, dude. I was like, I'm playing guitar for everybody.
Yeah, are you kidding me? That's a dream, absolutely, in its own. Sure.
True. But like you had said, the dream, and I didn't know that it had come true when I first met Paul. Why would I know that? And when we first started recording, why would I think that this thing was going to become what it's going to become and last, what's approaching 3 decades now? But I knew that I loved the man, and I loved his art form, and I loved his sincerity and his truthfulness to the art. He wasn't trying to do something just to sell records, He was the antithesis of what was going on at the time. I remember, I don't know if I was 12 years old, whatever it was, when I heard the opening guitar riff to Black Dog. And it shook me to the core, you know? And then when people, say the same thing about, Christmas Eve, Sarajevo, 12/24, it's because, there was nothing like that out at the time. And you couldn't have thought that up. Otherwise, somebody would have. It wasn't a formula. It was the mind of Paul O'Neill. And then I remember, for the first couple of years, all we would do was make records, and we'd sell a lot of records. We were selling millions and millions of CDs at the time, and never played a live show. I was like, dude, this is
wow.
It's like being in the Steely Dan of Christmas.
Right.
What do you got next, boss? Count me in.
Right.
And the other thing, forget about the finance part for a minute.
Okay.
The most valuable part of my time with Paul was I never felt stifled in any way in any part of my musical ability, meaning that one minute he's got me reading a Mozart symphony, and try to translate the viola, the cello parts of the guitar. Next minute he's got me shredding. Next minute he's got me playing acoustic guitar. He's got me playing, jazz stuff. Every style of music is on a TSO record because it represents a different character that he's portraying through his story. You follow me?
Right.
So I was done. I was good right there and then. It's just like I get to do all these different styles of music all the time with a producer who's awesome, and we're selling a lot of records. That was it. That was the win for me right there.
Man, there's a little confusing part in here that I want you to kind of clear up for me, because when I first heard the song Christmas Eve in Sarajevo, it was Sabotage. That was the name of the band. Like I mentioned earlier, Sabotage was a band, in the Tampa Bay area that had a song out called Gutter Ballet. It was a band in the late 80s. It was like that style of music, that hair band style of music. So when this instrumental Christmas symphony orchestra song comes out, it was still billed as Sabotage. When did the name Trans-Siberian Orchestra come into play?
Paul, after that season, when New Year's hit in '96, I remember him saying, I'm going to write an entire story around that one song, that one piece of music.
Okay.
It kind of he had all these great stories in his head. I know that he and his wife used to stay up night after night after night talking about different ideas and things. And his daughter, when she came into the world as well, very creative family. But he told me, he goes, I want to write something around this whole thing. And he goes, I got the story in my head. I was like, yes, absolutely. And I remember a bunch of us, it was John Oliva, obviously, Paul, myself, another gentleman named Bob Kinkle, would just get together, and Paul would kind of, say, let's try this. And we would kind of like looking around at each other's smiles like, this is cool. It may or may not ever see the light of day, but we're coming up with great arrangements of traditional Christmas songs, classical masterpieces by the great composers, coming up with riffs on the fly. And in Paul's head, he knew where every piece belonged. And, we started recording it. It was like, dude, this is awesome. And he goes, okay, and I'm going to call it the Trans-Siberian Orchestra. And I'm like, huh? Okay.
Wow.
Whatever you want to call it, count me in. I love hanging out with you. I love working for you. I love working with you,
And what did you think? What was your first thought when he said, I want to call this Trans-Siberian Orchestra?
You're talking about a guy who like took a heavy metal song and made it the number one requested song in America.
Right.
You know, brother, you lead the charge. I got your back.
Okay.
You know, I mean, it is what it is. You know, like it was a sort of success that, again, it was a musical success. I felt good about. Here we are in a post-Kurt Cobain world where guitar heroes were kind of like thrown to the wayside, and that style of music was no more viable, you know. And here we are, the top of the radio chain for a couple months a year, you know, with my guitar screaming through everybody's car stereo. I was like, this is awesome.
And not to mention, Al, this went from and I know that you've played with some big guys. There's no doubt about it. Alice Cooper, one of the biggest. But I mean, dude, during the holidays, you guys are selling out huge arenas, maybe like Madison Square Garden, I would assume, multiple nights. Like, I mean, this is
twice a day, brother. When you ask me that, you know, did I see this on the horizon? No.
No way. You couldn't have, right?
To be 60, I'm going to be 61 years old next week, like I said, and to know that like we're going out, there's 104 shows in 45 days in 62 cities, you know. Now, I hope they all sell. I mean, they did last year.
They do.
You know? That's why we work hard all year to make every year even better than the previous year. But, you know, and take away all of that, for you to turn around and tell me that, you know, our music or Paul's music and the stories have become part of family's tradition. I've heard people tell me 1,000 times, you know, dude, it's not the holidays till you guys come through town and blow the place up, or we play your music from Thanksgiving to New Year's. I mean, that is success.
And
I am so proud of that. We're part of the fabric of so many different families.
And what I was going to tell you just a little bit earlier is my parents live in Sarasota. My dad is 87 and my mom is 83 or 84. And I'm telling you, it was only a couple of years ago that they went to see Trans-Siberian Orchestra at Amalie Arena. Like, people in their 80s go to the show, and people in their teens go to the show. The audience is massive, and I've never seen anything like this. And knowing a little bit of the story that Mason Dixon has told me, a little bit of the story that you have told me, this, I want people to know, is this does not happen often, if ever. And you're talking to a guy that it happened to. And I know that you said, take away the monetary, the financial part of it. I can tell you the financial part of this is also massive. So, I mean, I could tell you that this band every year does a concert in the Tampa Bay area for a foundation called the Christmas Wish Foundation that my friend and your friend, Al, Mason Dixon, has set up. And this sells out every year, and they donate a certain amount of money per ticket sold, and the community rallies behind it. And we have raised so much money for the Christmas Wish, Mason Dixon's Christmas Wish, and these guys have been a part of it every year, and it's just amazing. So what you make... I
appreciate you saying that, brother. Listen, Paul O'Neill, his wife, his daughter, the O'Neill family, incredibly philanthropic people, generous. It's amazing, you know, their generosity. Tampa is known as the lightning capital of the world. Am I not mistaken?
Correct.
It's a hometown show.
Right.
And that first lightning strike occurred, ironically, coincidentally, in Tampa. You know.
Wow.
And that's how it all began. And here we are 28 years later, you know, always thanking the O'Neill family. You know, $1 from every ticket sold since 1999 when we opened up in the Tower Theater, or opened up at the Tower Theater in Philly, $1. Every ticket we've ever sold goes back into the community.
That's so cool.
So we sold, I think somebody told me we sold about 18 million tickets over the last 20-something years.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable, man.
So I'm so proud to be part of an organization that doesn't just talk about doing something.
You do it.
You know, and a family that talks about doing something. You know, the O'Neills have done something. You know, so God bless them.
It's an awesome story, man. I wish you the best. And again, thanks for telling the story. I mean, it seems like if this never happened, you're having a great career as being a hired gun. You're teaching music. You've got a good thing going on. Not all musicians can say that. And then this happens, puts you on a whole new level, like into the stratosphere. It's an incredible story. And it's just, you talk to people where things happen and it's that old cliche, that old saying like, hey, you can do whatever you want, as long as you work hard. But I mean, it's true. I mean, this is just such a huge thing that has happened to you 30 years ago, whatever the case may be. You're teaching guitar, this happens, and here we are talking on the radio. It's just, I love it, man.
A great time talking about it.
I love
it. That's the best part of it, man. It's just it's a perpetual smile. It's just every day I wake up, I'm so grateful to be part of this. I'm so grateful for my family. I'm so grateful for relationships like yours and mine that have developed because of Paul's art form. It really is across the board. It's a great story, and I love telling that story.
That's awesome.
That, I shared that with you, and you shared that with me today, man. It's been a good talk.
Until next time, my friend.
All right, my brother. Much love and respect, and thank you so much for a wonderful time together.
Take care, man. Thank you. So Al's first job, he said, 1,000 of them when he was a kid. He worked at Modell's, which I believe is like a sporting goods store. He said he did, a lot of landscaping stuff, shoveling snow, raking leaves. He said he worked for a beer distributor. But his job, his real job, he was a hired gun in the music industry. So Alice Cooper hired him to go on tour, a hired musician in the studio. But his real job during all of this was a music teacher, which is kind of funny since his father was the principal of his high school. That was his everyday deal. He would teach music, and then boom, he'd get a job to go on tour, or boom, he'd get a job to go in the studio. So the main thing with Al was teaching guitar. So I think we could easily say if Trans-Siberian Orchestra did not happen for Al, that's what he'd be doing, and be, having a pretty great life doing it. Although I'd say working, 4 months out of the year to play sold-out arenas all over the world during Christmas, which is generally a happy time of the year. I would say that is a dream come true, because these guys are so successful. And the song. Every year around Christmas, you hear this rock and roll orchestra. Dun, 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 dun. That's TSO, Trans-Siberian Orchestra. He meets this producer, Paul O'Neill, back in 1985 when he was recording something for Michael Bolden. When a Man Loves a Woman, Michael Bolden. People don't realize that before all of that, Michael Bolden was a rock star, kind of. He became a star with, When a Man Loves a Woman, but he was a rocker. This guy wore tight jeans, leather pants, had long hair. So Michael Bolden, he hooked up with Al, and they met the producer, Paul O'Neill, and like he said, the rest is history. Such a cool story, man. Episode 51, you know what next week is? Episode 52, which represents 1 year officially of the Celebrity Jobber podcast. Thanks so much for your support. If you like the podcast, I would love if you subscribed, give us a 5-star rating, and leave a review. You can listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you pod. Past episodes are online at celebrityjobber.com. You can follow us on IG at Celebrity Jobber Podcast. And we'll talk again next week. Episode 52, 1 year old. Kind of amazing, isn't it? Once again, thank you so much. Until next week, I'm Jeff Zito.